organizers for accepting for me to present this early on. This is part of my first chapter of my dissertation that I've just concluded, so it's very early work, but so any feedback that you have will be really, really helpful. Overall, as you can see from the title, I'm trying to look at the role of ideas, in particular neoliberal ideas, and looking into differences within neoliberal ideas themselves. And then the role of the Director General for Trade in, let's say, in accumulating and promoting those ideas within EU's trade policy. So how did this all come to be? The wider context within which I started thinking about the dissertation was the earlier work on the resilience of neoliberal ideas, especially during the global financial crisis and the economic crisis, and look into how DG Trade and other policy actors have promoted export-oriented interests and the idea of competitiveness, regardless of the expectations of protectionism. This links to an idea about this also links to this wider trade policy agenda that we spoke about yesterday, and the complexity of the international trade policy system, and how when the international trade system is no longer that much about tariffs, it goes to the heart of regulatory issues and different regulatory philosophies of member states. And then, on top of this, you have the Director General for Trade as the chief negotiator that has to consolidate these different regulatory philosophies and aims to promote them externally within multilateral and bilateral settings, through different choice of venues that has been studied before as well. So within this context, I was wondering, first of all, why, how come the Director General for Trade manages to keep markets open, at the same time consolidates the different regulatory philosophies by the different member states, and at the same time keeps promoting them sometimes more successfully than other times. And questions that the research that I try to look at is how ideas are constructed, and in particular how neoliberal ideas are constructed, by looking into the difference within neoliberalism itself. So I try to explore how the interaction between the Director General for Trade and member states through the Trade Policy Committee shapes this normative consensus, how this is done, and what is the consensus that comes about. In order to do this, I think that one of the ways to highlight the ideational component is to look at how EU consensus is challenged from the outside. So when EU normative consensus is challenged, how this ideational dissonance is then consolidated back within the interaction between DG Trade and TPC. So whether the normative debate is reopened again. Some of the assumptions within my approach, as I said, I've tried to look into the role of ideas. So I do not dismiss other factors, and I don't try to look into a dichotomy between material and ideational factors, but I assume that ideas have a strong role in EU trade policy making, and that role is beyond just being material straitjackets. That it drives to an extent policy making when it comes to regulatory issues and non-tariff barriers. And then I hold the position that ideas are constituted; they are not just out there, and how they're constituted also matters how far they influence policies. What I mentioned earlier, I take an actor-centered approach, so I try to look at how precisely the Director General for Trade within the European Commission prioritizes certain neoliberal ideas to others with its interaction with different member states' ideologies, and how these ideas start to constitute EU's normative position then that is legitimized externally. As you can see from this side, it does. My initial idea was to try to look at all three steps. So how first normative consensus is created internally, then how it is promoted, and then when challenged, how this is taken back. So, but because this is quite extensive, I'm now focusing almost exclusively on how the interaction between DG Trade and the TPC shapes this normative consensus in the first place. And then as the first, since we speak about the wide trade policy agenda, it constitutes everything from government procurement through environment to social issues. So I've started with to test how this could work, specifically focusing on the area of competition policy and competition aspects of competition issues within trade policy. So looking into the interaction between competition and trade. And the reason to this is that I started looking into competition issues and how they have become more and more prolific, not only into bilateral enforcement agreements, but also in cooperation agreements, MPTAs, plurilateral agreements, and also on the multilateral level. So at the same time, the literature, when it comes to competition and the link between competition and trade policy, has mostly focused on legal and economic issues rather than looking from it from a political economic perspective. And mostly it does show a good example of these both changes and continuities when it comes to the neoliberal discourse and this move from embedded neoliberalism to neoliberal thinking. At the same time, it links with wider issues that I'm looking to explore that have been studied before on the discourse of globalization and how that conditions trade policy. When it comes to the link between trade and competition and how I'm going to proceed next, I first am going to look for neoliberal norms in competition and try to distinguish between competition-based, free trade competition-based policies versus industrial policy versus national champion-based approaches that I think at this stage from my preliminary research to an extent quite clearly linked with different member states' ideologies and that again have been looked at before. And then I want to move on to look at the starting positions of your member states, so underlying national norms on competition and how that links to trade in particular. And then I'll move on to discussion to EU competition policy. Again, when it comes to competition, the most accepted I'd say, approach has been that trade liberalization limits the use of competition, the use of regulation as to safeguard competition. So trade policy has been seen as competition policy. However, lately, with the range of non-tariff barriers and with beyond barriers, we can look at competition also, and it has been looked at more and more as that it can be used as trade barrier beyond the promotion of consumer welfare and economic efficiency. The other reason to look at competition is that there are different, I'm trying to differentiate also within competition policy itself. So looking into different aspects of competition policy, so subsidies, mergers, and cartels, and looking through how, again, different approaches to competition and different liberal ideas kind of clash within the different aspects of competition policy. So what I'm planning to do next is to look at the prevalence or the shift of certain ideas. And I'm looking into a few different explanations that could be taken as a starting point. So looking into how within the interaction between the Director General for Trade and member states within CPC, certain states that have strong ideologies within certain areas have pushed that forward, and that has shifted normative consensus. Or member states with the highest bargaining power within the Council have done that, or through some informal institutional shifts, or as I said, through the policymakers' beliefs and convergence in neoliberal ideas. As I said, these are some of the questions that I'm looking at right now, and this is one of them is how to highlight and bring forward the role of ideas versus other existing factors. So in order to do that, I thought that it would be best to look at issues where EU policy and EU's ideas are challenged from the outside, so in particular by strong actors in the international trade scene. For example, the United States when it comes to agricultural subsidies, or so look at different instances where normative consensus is challenged from the outside, then the Director has to come back to reshape or have a re-agreement on the normative consensus. Then whether competition policy is a good starting point or whether it is it really mixes up the external and internal dimension. And for example, one of the issues where I have difficulty in clarifying this is when it comes to mergers, because it's very strong when it comes to internal competition policy and the single market. Then look into how valuable it could be to look into specific member states' discourses, because right now I've chosen a few member states to look at in particular when it comes to ideas in competition policy, such as Sweden, the UK, France, and Germany, as a starting point. And then I was thinking that would be a good idea to also look into the discourses within the member states and how this could additionally condition how ideas are promoted, and then looking into other examples of ideational dissonance and how I can take this further. As you saw from this very quick presentation, it's quite in an early on stage, because is that I'm trying to look at what is the best way to continue forward when it comes to looking to the links to highlight this ideational component that I would like to look at. And yeah, I think that's that for now. Thank you so much. And